Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Om Swastiastu. Namo Buddhaya, salam sejahtera. Good morning to the Excellencies, Rector of Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Profesor Dr. Haji Muhammad Solehuddin MPD MA, Vice Rector for Education and Students Affairs, Profesor Dr. Didi Sukyadi MA, Vice Rector for Research, Partnership and Business, Profesor Dr. Adang Suherman MA, Dean of the Faculty of Mathematics and Science Education, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Profesor Dr. Tatang Herman MED, Director School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Profesor Dr. Haji Shihabuddin MPD, Director of Directorate of International Affairs, Ahmad Bukhari Muslim PhD, Head of Department, Faculty of Mathematics and Science, Head of Science Education Program, School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Head of Executive Committee, all keynote speakers, all invited speakers, and all participants. Welcome to International Conference of Mathematics and Science Education 2021 by theme Sustainable Thinking Competencies Awareness Toward Society 5.0 in the Light of COVID-19. Bapak dan Ibu, selamat datang di Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Bandung, Jawa Barat. Kami dengan bangga mempersembahkan ICMScE 2021 yang pada tahun ini kembali dilaksanakan secara virtual. Ladies and gentlemen, in front of you, I would like to introduce myself. I'm Silva Sagita as your Master of Ceremony. I would like to deliver the agenda of ICMScE 2021 as follows. Listening the National Anthem of Indonesia. Conference report by Head of Executive Committee. Welcoming remarks by Director of School of Postgraduate Studies, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. Welcoming remarks and official opening of ICMScE 2021 by Director of Directorate of International Affairs. Closing session of the opening ceremony. Main session of ICMScE 2021. Keynote speaker session. Parallel session of the invited speakers, parallel session of paper presentation, and the last one is closing of ICMScE 2021. Ladies and gentlemen, during the session, I would like to ask you to give a virtual reaction. Please give your thumb or clapping sign you can find it in your Zoom. Okay. Before we proceed with the event, please have a seat and make yourself comfortable. And most importantly, please switch your microphone to mute mode. Bapak dan Ibu, dimohon kesediaannya kelak untuk memberikan virtual response berupa simbol jempol atau tepuk tangan. Sesaat lagi kita akan mengikuti sesi pembukaan dari ICMScE 2021. Demi ketertiban selama rangkaian acara berlangsung, dimohon seluruh partisipan untuk menonaktifkan fitur mikrofon. Terima kasih. Ladies and gentlemen, the first agenda will be listening the national anthem of Indonesia. To all audience, please rise for listening Indonesia Raya. Kepada seluruh hadirin, dimohon kesediaannya untuk berdiri untuk mendengarkan lagu Indonesia Raya. Thank you very much. Now you may take your seat. Hadirin dipersilahkan duduk kembali. Ladies and gentlemen, we would like to invite the chairman of committee to deliver the ICMScE 2021 report. To Dr. Ahmad Samsudin, MPD, floor is yours.
Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. On behalf of the organizing committee, I am honored and delighted to welcome Rector of Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Profesor Dr. Haji Muhammad Sofiuddin, MPD, Vice Rector of Research, Partnership and Business, Profesor Dr. Haji Adam, Vice Rector of Academic and Student Affairs, Profesor Dr. Didi Sutiati, MA, Director of International Affairs, Ahmad Bukhari Muslim, PhD, Dean of Mathematics and Natural Sciences Education Faculty, Professor Dr. Haji Batang Herman, MD, Director of Graduate School, Professor Dr. Syihabuddin, MPD. Keynote speakers, Professor Charles Hopkins from University of Toronto, Ontario, Canada, Dr. Ida Kaniawati, MSc from Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Professor Peno Shafo from University of Szeged, Hungary, Professor Muhammad Chalik from Trabzon University, Turkey, Professor Teknik Profession Dr. Faizah binti Syahbuddin from University Technical Malaysia, Malaysia. Invited speakers, Professor Dr. Nahadi, MPD, MSc, Chemistry Education, UPI, Professor Topik Hidayat, MSc, PhD, Biology Education, UPI, Dr. Eko Haryono, MPD, Science Education, Universitas Negeri Surabaya, Profesor Turmudi, MED, MSc, PhD, Mathematics Education, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Profesor Dr. Wawan Setiawan, MCom, Computer Education, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. All distinguished guests and participants to the International Conference on Mathematics and Science Education, ICMScE 2021. This conference, in the 6th International Conference, which held annually, started since 2016, organized by Graduate School in cooperation with Faculty of Mathematics and Natural Science Education of Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. In particular, the theme of ICMScE 2021 is Sustainable Thinking Competencies Awareness toward Society 5.0 in the light of COVID-19. The ICMScE 2021 should be beneficial for all participants. We can share and learn many current topics in various research fields. We do hope this event could facilitate all participants to interact each other intensively for extending scientific network in the future. We are pleased to inform that around 550 participants, 531 participants submitted abstract, and 470 participants submitted full paper. All participants presented by online system covering variety subjects of mathematics and mathematics education, natural sciences and natural sciences education, and STEM education. Especially, there are 5 keynote speakers and 5 invited speakers come from Canada, Hungary, Turkey, Malaysia, and Indonesia for plenary and parallel session respectively. Conference aside, Bandung is one of the wonderful travel destinations. From the perfect weather to the great and food, cultures, and beautiful sceneries. Please enjoy your stay in Bandung virtually, and we hope the COVID-19 pandemic will disappear and you can all visit Bandung in person. ICMScE 2021 couldn't occur without great assistance and support of many parties. In closing, we wish to express our gratitude to all keynotes and invited speakers who have come to share their knowledge in this event. Also, we gratefully thank to all participants for your contribution to ICMScE 2021. In advance, we would like to extend our appreciation and sincere thanks to Rector and Vice Rectors of Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia for continued support to this conference. Finally, I would like to thank the advisory board, steering and organizing committees, members for making this event occur. We wish all participants a very fruitful and pleasant scientific program of this conference. Thank you very much. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Chairperson ICMScE 2021.
Thank you very much, Dr. Ahmad Samsudin, MPD, for an excellent report. Therefore, proceeding with today's special event, and without further ado, for the first welcoming speech, I would like to invite our Honorable Director of SPS UP, Professor Dr. Shihabuddin, MPD. Time is yours. Please welcome.
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alamin wassalatu wassalamu ala ashrafil anbiya wal mursalin wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. The Honorable Rector of UPI, Professor Dr. H.M. Solehuddin MPD MA, the Honorable Vice Rector for Research, Partnership and Business, Professor Dr. Adang Suherman MA, Dean of Faculty of Mathematics and Science Education, Professor Dr. Tatang Herman, respected keynote speakers, plenary speaker, committee, and participants. It is my pleasure to welcome all the participants today for the International Conference on Mathematics and Science Education 2021, which because of COVID-19 outbreak, it is held virtually through a video meeting application. I also would like to warmly welcome to all eminent speakers and guests from many countries from different walks of life to exchange experience and work together on the existing general topic, namely sustainable thinking, competencies, awareness towards society 5.0 in the light of COVID-19. As time changes and so far education, I truly believe that education now empowers learners to take informed decision and responsible action for environmental integrity, economic viability, and just society for present and future generation while respecting cultural diversity. Shortly, this is education to achieve sustainable development. Sustainable challenge, including climate change, loss of biodiversity, poverty, epidemic like today that we are experiencing with COVID-19 and violence, conflict, and even the global society. In order to handle these issues, we need to create, to cultivate, to strengthen, even to maintain capacity to engage effectively with social, environmental, and economic change and challenge. Furthermore, I think cross-sectional sharing of knowledge and information was not only enough, and cooperation was difficult to solve those challenges, but a human-centered society that balance economic advancements with the resolution of social problems, where members have mutual respect for each other, thus transcending the generation and society with each every person can lead an active and enjoyable life. Uh, Finally, I would like to express my deep respect to all the committee, both from School of Postgraduate Studies, especially Ibu Ida Kaniawati and her colleagues, and Faculty of Mathematics and Science Education, speaker, and all participants. I hope all of us will learn a lot and lead to more academic advancement and building awareness for the future. Thank you very much. Akhirul kalam. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi. Thank you, Professor Dr. Shihabuddin MPD, for a very warm greeting. Ladies and gentlemen of distinguished guests, now we would like to hear the welcoming remarks and official opening of ICMScE 2021, delivered by Vice Rector for Education and Students Affairs, Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Professor Dr. Didi Sukyadi, MA. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
A very good morning to all of you. Innal hamdalillah wassalatu wassalamu ala Rasulillah wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa mawalah. Rabbi shrahli sadri wa yassirli amri wa hlul 'uqdatam min lisani yafqahu qawli, amma ba'du. The Honorable Dean of Faculty of Math and Science Education, Professor Tatang Herman, the Honorable Vice Deans, the Honorable Chair of Study Programs, the Honorable Director of School of Postgraduate Studies, Professor Sihabuddin, the Honorable Director of International Office, Pak Abu, the Honorable invited speakers, Profesor Nahadi, Profesor Topik Hidayat, Profesor Wawan Setiawan, Bapak Dr. Eko Haryana, Profesor Turmudi, and also the Honorable keynote speakers, Dr. Ida Kaniawati of Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, Profesor Muammar Khalik from Trabzon University, Turkey, and the Honorable Professor Beno Sefo from University of Szeged, Hungary, the Honorable Professor Dr. Faizah binti Shahbuddin from the University Technical Malaysia, and also Professor Charles Hopkins of York University in Toronto, Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, first of all, allow me to deliver my speech on behalf of UPI Rector, Professor Dr. Salehuddin MA, in which at this time he cannot be with us here together in this opening ceremony of International Conference of Math and Science Education 2021. First of all, welcome to Bandung, welcome to Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia, even though we come not in person physically, but through virtual media, Zoom. Also, I give you a warmest welcome, warmest friendly greetings from Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia. I know that this conference is in its sixth conference, and it has been organized continuously. It is an annual conference, and usually the participants participating in this conference is what we call attracting huge number of participants coming from different parts of provinces of Indonesia and also from other countries. And I know that the result of this conference have also been published in many different publication venues, not only in terms of proceedings, but also in reputable international journals. So I really appreciate and thanks the organizing committee, from the dean to the students participating is the organizing committee, who have been working very hard in such a way that this conference can be organized as it is today. And I know that the theme of this conference is also quite timely, sustainable thinking competencies, awareness toward society 5.0 in the light of COVID-19. I know that what I have in my mind about society 5.0 is a very smart society which relies on smart technology. For example, we will have in our surrounding independent car, whether for private or public transportation. We will have also the use of drone for shipping our goods. So we can buy our food through Gojek or through Grab, but if now we are using motorcycle, in the future we can use what we call drone. So drone is quite efficient and also quite fast. And when we refer to agriculture, if now we are using tractors, next time we are going to use tractors, but control by computers in our hand. And we can also use the drone to spray to control the pests, yeah, using the drone technology. Of course, if we want to have that kind of society, we have to prepare with human capital, with human sources, with having very high skill, very high technology, very high knowledge in every part of disciplines, not only in science, but also in in social science technology. So we have to be able to prepare a human resource with high technology that can participate in the era of smart society. So if we want to have that kind of human resource, then we have to revise, we have to improve our educational system in such a way that our education system will develop not only the ability to memorize information, but also to think critically and also to act critically in every situation. So critical thinking is very important. If no, we are still relying on memorizing information in what we call low order thinking, and it is very timely we improve our education system by emphasizing more on critical thinking. In both our secondary and tertiary education system, we are now stressing on what we call case method in our education system. So when we are doing the teaching and learning process, we have to put the emphasis more on what we call learner-centered learning through what we call case method, including problem solving, including team-based project, and also project-based learning. So in our 2013 curriculum at secondary school education system, the slot is already there. We have just to improve that. And in our university education system, our Minister of Education, Mas Menteri, has launched what we call Merdeka Belajar, Kampus Merdeka, independent learning, independent campus. And one of the strategies that we have to look at is the using what we call case method in our teaching and learning process in our tertiary education system. So we have to do those kind of activities in the frame of what we call sustainability, whether sustainability in our environment, sustainability in our education, sustainability in our economy, and also sustainability in our education. Sustainability is part of what we call MDGs that we have to achieve, because without sustainability, we will have only what we have for now for ourselves, but we will not have for our young generation in the future. We may be prosperous at this time, but maybe our earth will be destroyed in the future. Our sea will be destroyed in the future, and our society system will also be destroyed in the future. So we have to put our emphasis not only what we can have at this moment, not only of what we can achieve economically at this time, for example, the economic growth, but also sustainable issues. Of course, those issues at the moment is in a very tough challenge because of the COVID-19 pandemic. And pandemic is a global phenomena. We close our schools, we close our universities, and it will result in what we call education loss. And education loss will result in learning loss, while learning loss will result in what we call generation loss. So we have to discuss our strategies and our how to solve these kind of problems. So if we can use what we call online education system, we can use what we call online assessment system. We can do our test from home. We have what we call test from home using technology, but not can be solved through what we call online tool. We know that in Bandung itself, we have for secondary, for primary education system, our parents and our children can be categorized into three parts or three classes. The first one, parents and children who have the technology for online learning, and also they are able to use the technology. The second one, they may have the technology, but they can use them for doing what we call online learning. While the third one, those who do not have any technology and also do not have the ability to use the technology. So for the third category, they do not have any learning at all. So around my house at this time when I'm speaking, there are some school children who do not do any learning. They do not go to schools, they do not do online learning, and they do not have any. They do not have any resources for online learning, so they just stay at home. And this is around a city in Bandung. If we look at another regency, for example, in Ciamis, even though they live at the center of the city, I asked two teachers who happen to be husband and wife, one teaching at senior high school and one at junior high school. And during the pandemic, the English teacher at senior high school never used any Zoom for teaching and learning activities. So far, she used only WhatsApp and all the learning materials and also the assessment material like homework sent through WhatsApp. And then the students did it at home, and from 20 students, maybe only 5 returning the assignment. So it is a very serious problem. So the government tries to send back the children school again, but the challenge is not that COVID-19 is still around us, and after the holiday of Lebaran, we are now seeing the improvement of COVID cases in our surrounding. So we hope that it can be anticipated by the government. Other countries, developed countries like United Kingdom and the United States, they have already been able to anticipate the COVID-19 pandemic, but we still struggling to get the vaccine. Because according to CDC Chair Anthony Fauci, the only recipe for anticipating or for ending the pandemic is only 3 words: vaccination, vaccination, and vaccination. So we do hope that our government will be able to vaccinate most of the people in our country, so we can end this pandemic and we can go back to our normal life. Thank you so much, and I hope that all of you who are participating in this virtual conference will get benefit in knowledge sharing, and also benefit in building our scientific network. Thank you so much again, especially to the plenary speakers. I know that Professor Charles Hopkins is a very famous scientist from Canada, and we hope that he will give us any enlightenment about the topic that he is going to present to us. On behalf of the UP Rector and also the Vice Rector for Research, Partnership, and Business and Collaboration, we officially open this 6th International Conference on Math and Science Education by reciting Basmalah. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Thank you. A very good morning to all of you. Have a nice conference. Have a good day. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam.
Waalaikumsalam.
Thank you very much, Professor Dr. Didi Sukyadi MA, for sharing your thoughts and opening of this event. Ladies and gentlemen, please give your warmest reaction as the event has been opened officially. You can put your clap or your thumbs on your screens. Bapak dan Ibu, sebagai bentuk sukacita atas pembukaan resmi ICMScE 2021, dimohon kesediaannya untuk memberikan reaction virtual melalui Zoom masing-masing. Terima kasih. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the end of the opening ceremony of ICMScE 2021. Thank you very much for all of your kindest attention and appreciation. Bapak dan Ibu, selama beberapa jam ke depan, pertemuan ini akan memberikan kita banyak kesempatan untuk berdiskusi, berbagi pengetahuan, dan wawasan. This ICMScE 2021 is very special because not only because it held virtually, but also the keynote speaker is not only one, but there are 5 excellent speakers from different fields. The committee also has prepared many door prizes to keep you engaged and actively participate during the session. Please make yourself comfortable and do not miss any priceless sharing knowledge and door prize moment. Now, we welcome all of you to the main session of keynote speakers. For the first keynote speaker session, it will be guided by Bapak Arif Hidayat, SPD, MSc, PhD in Education. Okay, I would like to share his CV first, right? He is now working under Physics Department Universitas Pendidikan Indonesia as an assistant professor, and got his PhD in education title from Hiroshima University, Japan. His research interest is in TPAC, STEM learning, computational thinking, and school improvement. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome our first moderator, Arif Hidayat, SPD, MSc, PhD in Education. The room is yours.
Thank you so much for the MC, for your very nice introduction. And then welcome to all participants, guests, and speakers, the honorable all speakers, and also our Vice Rector, including the Chairman. Ladies and gentlemen, the participant of the ICMScE 2021, really nice to come back in this year as a moderator, and we would like to jump up to our first keynote speaker, And the name of the keynote speaker, as you know from the poster and also from the website, is the Professor Charles Hopkins. If you check in the participants list, he's already inside. Allow me to read out to pledge in front of you his short CV. Professor Charles Hopkins holds UNESCO Chair in Reorienting Education Toward Sustainability at York University, conducting research on ESD and coordinating 2 research networks. The first network is comprised of teacher education institutions spanning 50 countries, wow, focusing on the SDGs and the Global Education 2030 agenda. Meanwhile, the second network, covering 40 countries, aims to embed sustainability in curricula to improve the education of indigenous youth. He is advisor to the UN University Institute of Advanced Studies in Sustainability and their global network of regional centers of expertise on ESD, and also co-director of the Asia Pacific Institute on ESD in Beijing, China. Professor Hopkins has a long relationship with education and sustainability and has been a continuous part of UNESCO's efforts. Beginning in 1989, I'm still junior high school in that year, as part of the UN preparation team for the Earth Summit in Rio, Brazil. Professor Hopkins was a drafter of Chapter 36 of Agenda 21, that is promoting education, public awareness, and training. And I would like to say, good morning, Professor Hopkins.
Yes, good evening from Toronto.
Yeah, good evening.
and a very good morning to you and others.
Yeah, and you are most welcome for 5 minutes for your presentation, and after that we will have a dialogue around 10 until 15 minutes. Professor Hopkins.
Terima kasih.
Yeah.
Eta bodas teh itu. Bonat aku.
Okay. Thank you very much. Conference chair, honorable distinguished guests, vice rector, my fellow keynote speakers and presenters, and participants, a very good morning to you there in Bandung. I would like to congratulate the conference planning team. If I look at the title of trying to embrace thinking competencies and engage with Society 5.0 in a context of COVID-19, it was very innovative and very timely. About 3 hours ago, UNESCO just released a science report, and it was entitled "The Race Against Time for Smarter Development." And so the idea of Society 5.0, the use of technology, the use of data, and so on, is so very timely. So congratulations on seeing that coming through when you were first beginning your planning. Right, let me say a few words about the pandemic. We've learned a lot. We know now about many of the challenges, the failure of the online infrastructure, what kinds of things that are needed for teachers to prepare to do this, how to engage students in this way, being aware of their own mental health and the mental health of us as educators and teachers. Are concerned for students, but then the challenge of how do you assess students? How do you know whether you're assessing the students or the parents, an older brother or sister or whatever? You know, there was a joke here amongst many teachers saying, "I'm so afraid to give the parents of a grade 1 teacher a failing mark." You know, this is the kind of concern. But we also see the opportunities that are there with online learning and the possibilities of global engagement and what we can do. But the trick is going to be, how do we capture the essence of the possibilities. How do we prepare teachers? How do we change curriculum? And how do we change the perceptions of it? Because parents, I think now in many places, they have not had their children in school for most of the year. And they now really appreciate not only the role of education, but they also are ready for change. I think that now the opportunity is there really to change. But we have to think in this kind of a context that the pandemic is one thing, but if we, sorry, if we look at the World Economic Forum, they have put together a number of other huge issues that that we have to sort of be aware of beyond the idea of the pandemic. If you look at this graph, the vertical axis on the left rates the impact, and the horizontal axis is the likelihood of it happening. So if you go way up to the upper right corner, which would be the most disastrous and most likely to happen, you come upon climate change. If you look at the other circled one, it's infectious diseases. And then you look at other issues that are there. But the pandemic is one. And as educators in preparing our youth to live in the future, we must keep our eyes on larger sort of thematic issues, because there are other things. Sorry. There are many other global challenges that are out there. If you just look at issues around poverty and exclusion, the creeping racism that is infusing societies as groups are forced into moving into others' territories. The vice rector looked very carefully at the need that we must survive and thrive, but not at the expense of future generations. But as educators, we must think if these are the big issues, we must also look at them as opportunities, because these are the issues that will be driving the economy of the future. These issues are not going to go away. Right? So what we have to do is to be thinking about how do we take issues and so on and build them into our education community. And so it's the idea of the Society 5.0 that really began to enthrall me when I was invited to speak, and I'm very grateful that you did, because linked to it is from the private sector and the economy sector. What goes hand in glove with Society 5.0 is Industry 4.0. And this is, of course, closely linked with STEM, with science, technology, engineering, mathematics, and so on. And so this trend towards wide-scale data gathering, automation, the collection of information and knowledge from all over, and this affecting our lives, is very, very important. Now, it seems as though the idea of Society 5.0 is largely driven out of Japan, and the idea of that we must now think of how do we move from an information society, a Society 4.0, to this Society 5.0. But how do we do a huge challenge for teachers and teacher educators, right? This is going to be very, very important. The the idea that came from Japan as well, that I think is very important, is aligning Society 5.0, aligning it with what our nations are already working towards, and that is the Sustainable Development Goals. So instead of dropping the Sustainable Development Goals, but looking at them as a framework, looking at them as a globally accepted framework to build upon. And this is extremely important for us to be considering. The idea of how do we do this globally is very intriguing, because I'd like you to take a moment and think about the difference between Japan and Japanese society, their worldview, and the situation in Indonesia, or the situation in Australia, the situation in Nepal, South America, right? So this idea of how do we gather the information, in Society 5.0, instead of parking information up in the internet and then going looking for things that other people have parked up there. The idea with Society 5.0 is to have automation glean information from all our electronic devices and gather this data, analyze it, and feed it back to us in a form of artificial intelligence. Now, how do we feel in our particular society about global messaging coming back to shape us? Are we really ready for that as yet? But still, we need to think about that. When I said, think for a moment about the difference in societies, think of Japan with its aging population, seeking young workers, and think of the countries where they already have huge numbers of young people who are already unemployed. The situation is so very different. We have countries that are like Japan that has the internet spread all over, right? And then we have other countries with very little access. What will this do in widening the development gap between countries? Some countries have a very, very good social safety net. For the unemployed, they are not going to starve. They will be looked after. In many countries, they will even receive housing and guaranteed a small but guaranteed annual income, where we have other nations where large sectors of society will not be able to move. So simply preparing for this Society 5.0 is not just about buying computers. Right? It is going to take considerable social sciences as well as natural sciences and the physical sciences and so on in order to move into that kind of a direction. Now, I'm mentioning what we already have is the Sustainable Development Goals, and we can use that. Right now, let's go back to COVID. We must think of the Sustainable Development Goals not individually, but as a united framework. Some addressing social aspects, some economic aspects, the human aspects, and the environmental aspects, and so on, all in a collaborative framework that's intertwined and networked together. That's how we have to think of it. And when you think of any of the issues, whether it's climate change, COVID, forced migration, natural disasters, which is a huge component of life in Southeast Asia. These are the issues that we need to somehow address in this concerted way. And so the idea of embedding the Sustainable Development Goals in all aspects of our teaching is so important.
Pak, acaranya di sini ya, di sini ya. Ya. Oke.
So the idea of science. Now let me take the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular, let's look at STEM. STEM and research, science, and education in general plays an extremely important role and is embedded throughout the Sustainable Development Goals, particularly in 2, 3, 4, 7, 8, 9, 13, 14, and 17. But I'll come back to this in a moment because it really is an integral part of all of the Sustainable Development Goals. But this particular role of science, the world now needs to make rapid decisions, to collaborate, and in democracies, it is extremely difficult for governments to make decisions that are not supported in the general public. We know of the power of the internet from a negative point of view, the planting of fake news, the planting of conspiracies, and so on. So part of learning to live in Society 5.0 is the idea of how to tell truth from fact. What is reasonable? How do you deal with that? And for governments to try to make decisions that are based on science. And so it is extremely important that the general population have a good science background as to what makes sense and what doesn't. We'll never have societies where they are all scientists, and we'll never have societies where everyone is a mathematician. But they should have a general feeling of what makes sense. Does this sound reasonable? Does it not? And the idea of trying to negotiate between governments, the trust that we have in science for science-based decision-making must be maintained. And so the ethics and the honorability that is there in science to base multilateralism and democracy upon is extremely important to maintain and to keep. Now, another of the huge issues, of course, is the Sustainable Development Goals seem so remote. You know, they were global issues negotiated over time between governments and so on, but based on a huge internet program that was called The World We Want, where hundreds of thousands of people talked about what are the issues that we really need to address, and came down with these 17 goals that the governments have said could agree upon. But how do we translate? And this is, I think, is the role of science, all teachers really in different aspects, but often the leadership of science and other teachers of STEM is so important. So if we take the three major areas, the environmental, social, and economic, and we try to translate them down to the community level. So we talk about things that from environmental, we don't necessarily pick a particular sustainable development goal and go with the fine United Nations print of it. But we look at what is the context in a way of our own housing issues, you know, in Jakarta. What are the issues around transportation? We're talking about the use of motorcycles as delivery vehicles. The whole idea of the delivery of that last mile, whether it's drone, motorcycles, people who are already going in that direction, moving goods and so on. Waste and sewage and energy. If we look at the economic part, how do we provide decent work? Right? Not just the race to the bottom where the cheapest possible remuneration, but how do we build in and address poverty issues in our area? The big area globally, of course, of corruption and so on. So these are the issues, and how do we then take and build them in at the local level? And you can see that STEM plays an important role, but so too do the social sciences. And within our faculties and our schools and so on, there has to be tremendous collaboration. No one discipline owns this all, right? This is the whole thing. And again, I will come back to that. Now, if we look at Sustainable Development Goal 4, and I want to now sort of focus in, you will see that there are the seven targets that are in there. And in particular, I would like you to sort of just glance. You have 4.1 with primary and secondary education, 4.2 with early childhood and care, and so on. There's a new sort of a focus on 4.5 on the vulnerable, the indigenous, and those students with gender equity and so on that needs to be there. But in particular, the idea of 4.6 with numeracy and include adults, but of course that has to be with our youth. And 4.7, which talks about knowledge and skills for sustainable development. The 4.7 it talks about the need to have all our learners when they are going through school, and certainly when they graduate, to have the knowledge and skills needed to live sustainable lifestyles, and to get this through education for sustainable development, which includes things like sustainable lifestyles, human rights, gender equality, and so on, peace and nonviolence, which is extremely important, and a concept of global citizenship. So when we mention this, let me just say a word about what is education for sustainable development. It was mentioned in the introduction that I was part of the original writing team back in the late 1980s and early 1990s, when we were trying to figure out what is education for sustainable development. And it basically is 4 areas of concern. The first one is making sure that everyone gets an education. So it's access and retention in quality education. When we were a writing team, I love to tell this story because stories often relate to us, right? We were trying to think what was really necessary in the form of education. And the president of a huge university in the Americas said, we just need better recycling programs. If everyone really knew about when we recycled, that would be great. And the dean of the Faculty of Education in the University of Cairo replied, he said, I have several 100,000 students who are very, very good at recycling. The problem is they're not students, they're children living in the dumps of Cairo. They need an education. And it struck us, and so this first one is that we need knowledgeable, educated societies. But the second point came when we came back and thought it's our most educated countries that are leaving some of the deepest ecological footprints on the planet. So simply more education that is largely aimed at development, more education of the same as that we have had is not the answer. We need to reorient. We need to transform our current education systems in order to do it. The third area is public awareness and understanding. We can't do much in democracies without the general population being on side. They need to understand what it's all about, and that understanding starts in our school systems. And the fourth are training programs where we do know how to do things better. Now, we don't want to think of this as one subject. It is a purpose of education. It's embedded in what we teach, what we timetable, what we fund, what we assess, and what we mark upon. Now, the United Nations General Assembly has pointed out education for sustainable development. Yes, it's an integral part. It's 4.7. It's a real target within Sustainable Development Goal 4. But they also point out that education, public awareness, and training is an essential part of all 17 goals. Right? We need to improve agriculture. If we're going to come up with a new strain of rice or wheat or whatever, we need to have the researchers, whether it's oceanography, whether it is understanding climate change, whatever those 17 goals happen to be. Providing decent work means that we need to embed sustainability in our technical and vocational education and training. Our TVET programs are the key to bringing sustainability into our small to medium-sized enterprise. The big industry, they understand it. It's about eco-efficiency for them. They're going to save money, energy, water, waste management, and so on. But to bring it out through society, we need training, so on. And so the idea of education for sustainable development is part of Goal 4, but also the big key enabler. Now, there are three main components that I think that would help us as teachers to be thinking about these different issues, because none of us can be masters of all of these issues. But if we guide students in their research, in their phenomena-based learning, their project learning, and so on, if we even frame it in these three areas, what can be done once we see it on the horizon? What can be done to prevent it? Right? What can we do to mitigate it, to make the impact much, much less? How can we be prepared for it? And thirdly, how can we adapt? Once it is here, what are the changes that we need? If it's going to be mass migration or forced migration into our countries, we have to be aware of that. And yesterday was the day we should be starting to teach nonviolence and intercultural relationships, understanding of other religions and peoples and worldviews and ways of thinking. Right? So I just suggest these three as a way of starting and moving forward. Now, let me move on more into STEM and so on. This is a Mongolian herder, and you can see the use of an iPad. The infusion of technology coming into our lives it is there. And again, we have to look at it. Where can we make sure that the use is appropriate? How can we try and prevent the digital schism or gap between the haves and have-not, the access to it, because it is real. With those who have access and the advantage of it, and those who do not. So our systems and so on, our governments need to address that. What I would like to plant also is the idea of our research and science, technology, the idea of purpose behind it. So it's not just STEM for money, for more gadgetry. We need to move quickly, and we need to move with focus. And one of the great areas that I think that is reasonably safe as a guiding mechanism is blending from the natural sciences the whole idea of biomimicry, where looking at the knowledge that has been built up over millennia through natural selection and so on, the idea of how we can learn how nature does things. The Japanese bullet train is the classic one. They started out with they saw that the kingfisher bird, in diving into the water, penetrates just the sleekness of the bill and the head shape, and encountered that on the front of trains to make them much more streamlined. But going through tunnels in Japan, there are many, many mountain ranges, and going through tunnels, the vibration was shaking the train as it was going through at high speed. And so then they developed a whole generation of the fronts of train that were built modeled on the duck-billed platypus of Australia, the small mammal that can go through streams, swimming through shallow streams without throwing much wake. And so the going through the tunnels without vibrating and shaking. These are just some of the ideas. Spider web, much stronger than steel. The abalone shell. How does an abalone animal, the mollusk, how does it take salt water, sand, and so on, and the elements out of the water and build a shell that's like concrete, and yet without any ecological footprint? Because when it actually dies, all of that goes back into nature in a closed loop, a closed circle economy. In mathematics, one of the big areas, I think that the generations and people have to be aware of both extremely small numbers and extremely large numbers. This is so important. You know, the difference between parts per thousand, parts per million, parts per billion. This is important, but also in the way of economics. And just to visualize, we keep throwing around numbers, $1 billion. If this is a skid, a meter by a meter by a meter, okay, of $100 US bills. This comes out to, these aren't single bills, these are $100 bills. And so you come out with 10 skids, make $1 billion. But every so often now, we say, well, let's add $1 trillion. This is what $1 trillion would look like. Now, it'll take you some time to find the person sitting or standing down in the left-hand corner. These are skids too high and covering roughly 4 soccer fields. So you see, when we add $1 trillion of anything to, and these are $100 bills, not $1 trillion single, right? So just coming up to some of those ideas. The idea of embedding our work in higher education, the idea of putting it into our teaching, our research, and our community service is something that we still have such a long way to go if we're going to bring this in the way of sustainable development. We have to learn how we engage all aspects and bring it in with purpose, because most people are already, especially in university, the idea that you have your own little narrow area of influence. And so we have to find ways of doing that. The idea of how do we embed it throughout the university, and not, there is emerging the concept of sustainability science that is bringing a few disciplines together and referring to this cluster as sustainability science. We still need to talk about this a long way. because most people are influenced as much by the arts as they are by science. So we need to either think of STEAM, where we throw in the arts and artificial intelligence and so on in with the science and the STEM group. But more likely, it is going to be our administration coming up with an integrated approach. Right? That's, as I say, no one person can do it all. We have to find out ways of bringing it forward and so on. Now, I want to stress the importance of the natural sciences. We can get carried away with the electronics and the digital world and so on. But we need to think of also in the way of the natural sciences, especially with young children. There is a natural affinity to learning, experiential learning, and being in the field and so on. Learning to love nature itself. And so how do we, and to care for it, respect it, how do we create that setting? And for most of us, we have to use the urban built environment in the same way as we use the natural environment. And these are just some examples. On the left, this is in China, and a teacher was showing me an electronic sea turtle that the students had invented as part of a project. This is a turtle that is solar powered. It's electronic and it can travel out in the oceans. It automatically dives, goes down, takes water temperature, measures sea drift, and so on. So it's part of oceanography. In the middle one, these are indigenous students who were putting out nature trails and putting QR codes on. And then the other is from India. And these were students who were collecting wisdom, technical, traditional ecological knowledge from villages around traditional medicine and herbs, and using this within their community.
Bisa nggak?
So,
Background ini kan taruh foto adik.
right, can we get next? So at the heart of it, I'm sorry, I apologize. I'm having trouble moving our slides. One of the things that we're asking for is, and calling for, is this idea of transformation. And I think it's important that UNESCO has just released a roadmap from now until 2030 of how to embed education for sustainable development, or ESD, into our school systems. And one of the things they're calling for is not just the tweaking of things, but to overall transformation of schools itself that would have to be in line with our community, our values, our worldviews, and so on. But because of time, I won't go really into it, but there are different stages. One of exposing the learners to the realities, that are age appropriate and so on, are what are the things that we do need to address within our community, to have them understand it, to do an analysis. Where did it come from? How big is this global, or is this our community? Why is it there? Who is benefiting from it? What would be, if we change it, what would we change to? What would be the new problems? So this whole critical analysis. And then the idea of building a connection, whether we're, and doing it in an empathetic way, so that there is, it's not just knowledge about, but it's emotional engagement. It's a feeling of empowerment. It's a feeling that we can actually do something about it, to engage, whether it's successful or not, but engage in it. Because the more senses that are involved, the greater and deeper the learning experience can be. The other thing is the idea of seeking other worldviews, other ways of thinking. the whole idea of honoring our traditional ecological knowledge, indigenous ways, that have proven successful over millennia, is something that we need to show respect for, and ways of learning, because we know where we are now, what we have evolved to in Western economic thinking, and things being based on economics. It's not really working. We need to seek other alternatives. And so the idea of how to respectfully engage is important. The idea of ethics. I was in a classroom in China, and they were talking about the space race, and it was secondary school. They were studying engineering, and they were talking about putting satellites in the air. And one of the things they were looking at is how many satellites are already there, and how many more satellites, and the debris that was up there. And the students were really concerned about the ethics. They were openly saying, what gives our generation the right to put 1 million pieces of space debris out there? And what is the impact on future generations, and so on? So the ethics that is involved in there. And winding down, the idea of bringing global perspectives into STEM, into science and mathematics, to create this feeling of responsibility for far beyond just themselves. And lastly, the idea of competencies. Let me say a couple of words. The competencies that go along with building global citizenship. Lots of UNESCO documents and so on that are out there that are very, very good. And the idea of moving beyond just my own skill and relevance into the idea of community science. The young scientist movement, the internet is full of the recordings and the ideas, the visual sightings and so on of community science. The interdependence with others, and the idea that giving them the skills so that if they want to bring about change, they will know how to go about and address politicians and so on. Beyond the global citizenship competencies, those were competencies for students, but we need competencies for teachers as well. And there's work in Southeast Asia, and I know some of your professors are engaged and involved in this. Or what are the competencies for teachers themselves? The idea of themselves being lifelong learners, and how to do that, how to collaborate, how to connect, and so on. So these are competencies that are important. And then for those of you who are going into the digital competencies, once again, UNESCO is being there and important. Lastly, let us not forget the empowerment of our youth. Giving them not only the good academic knowledge to build upon, but the skills to bring about change and to control the lives they're going to be working into. Thank you very, very much for this opportunity to share and be with you. And I look forward, if there's time for some questions. But again, thank you much for this opportunity.
Thank you so much to the Professor Charles for your presentation, a very wide perspective about SDG, ESG. I really like the part of the large perspective about the size of all water if we put in a certain distance. Well, the audience of ICMScE, if you have any inquiries, dialogue, or questions, you are most welcome in 2 modes. You are able to raise your hand, or you might put on the chat room. I'm happy to place your questions. Now I would like to put or to open the dialogue from the raise hand session. If you would like to make a raise hand, please just click raise hand on the participants, and you are most welcome to say your questions, comments. On the participants list, we have Professor Ari Widodo. Professor Ari Widodo, I would like to unmute you for this purpose. Yes, Professor Ari, you're most welcome.
Thank you for Arif. No, I'm not asking question. I just want to thank Charles and Catherine for contributing to our conference. Thank you very much for your contributions.
You're most welcome. Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, thank you so much, Professor Adi, for the very warm greeting. Now, I would like to jump up with the chat room. We have one of the audience who asking the question to the Professor Charles. He said that from a big picture of your presentation, which is boldly talk about sustainability, which means it is a new era. What about the fate of fundamental science or basic science in the future? Professor Charles, please.
Yes, well, I think it is extremely important. What we need is the pure or basic science to give us the building blocks. Right? We desperately need that. But we need to also know what we want to build. And so the idea of the building blocks combined with the vision of what it is that we want to do. In many of the same ways, I think of PISA, the Program for International Student Assessment, where we compare countries, our education systems. We compare math, science often, but math and language primarily. Okay? What this does is it raises the concept that math and language and science are the purpose of education, because that's all we measure and compare. But I say, no, these are the tools. And yes, we need them as sharp as possible. But they're only the tools. They're not the purpose. They're not what we want to build. What is the society that we really want so that we use that? So the role of basic science is the same. They're extremely important building blocks, but they're not the final product.
Yeah, so the role is same as a part of the important building blocks. That's very very nice point. Thank you so much. Well, actually, there are some questions still left here, but unfortunately, Professor Charles, since the limitation of time, I have to close this session.
Pak Arif, may I have
Professor
one?
Arif, please.
Pak Arif?
Yes, please.
I just say thank you so much, Professor Charles. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for your sharing. And I'm really interested in your statement about biomimicry. And I once watched a program on National Geographic that biomimicry also takes place in the form of social life of animal. So social life, human chimpanzee, for example, is a reflection of our human social life. So it is not only about the structure of platypus or the structure of beak of kingfisher, but also the social life of a certain species of animal will also a kind of reflection of our human being. So the way someone attracts his sexual partner, for example, in human being is the same as the case in a chimpanzee. What do you think about this, sir?
Yeah, we have so much that we have to change in our way of thinking socially. If we look at the implications simply of climate change, we know now that there is going to be massive forced migration. Even from sea level rise, there's going to be forced migration even within our own countries. How do we prepare? How do we mitigate? And how do we start now with the adaptation of people in our huge cities being forced to move and rebuild on farmlands? You know, because these are going to be the wealthy people moving into often poorer areas. They will have the political power. You know, we need to be thinking through all of that. And whether we learn from nature, from what happens when one species invades into another species territory, that could be one thing. But somehow we need to engage with the social sciences, and we need to engage with the arts, but all of it being based on sound science and not just some sort of made up, simple solution that is easily marketable.
Okay, thank you very much indeed, Prof. Thank you.
Thank you. And
thank you so much.
have a wonderful conference.
Yeah, and audience, if you check back your chat room, Catherine support background from Professor Hopkins, share many links, especially the last report of the UNESCO a couple of hours ago that was mentioned by the Professor Hopkins. Thank you so much, Professor Charles Hopkins, for your sharing knowledge and also experience in this conference. And I would like to say reaction through online by Thump and also flat for you. Then, do you want to say something, please? Okay.
I wish you a wonderful conference, and I'm amazed at having over 400 teachers out on a Saturday. Congratulations. Obviously, these are people who care. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And for the audience of ICMScE, I would like to give back this event to the Silva. Silva's the MC. Silva, please.
Much.